Hello, everybody, and welcome to my last report on the ground here in Park City, Utah. I'm going to do one more video about the Sundance Film Festival when I get back home, recapping everything that I saw while I was here. But I wanted to give you an update as we enter the last day of the festival. As you're watching this video, it'll be Sunday morning. I'm recording this on Saturday evening. So Sundance 2026 is almost over, and the festival's time here in Park City, Utah is almost over. And there is a feeling that has descended in the last few days that I think could best be described. When I got here, it was kind of bittersweet. It was people saying, well, I'm excited for this year's festival, but boy, are we going to miss it. And these last few days, it's gotten a lot sadder. I've talked to a lot of people who have been coming for decades who say that they're not going to follow the festival to Boulder, a lot more trepidation about what's going to happen when it moves. And so there is this feeling of sadness here in Park City as the festival begins to close out its last installment. And fewer people are wondering if anyone's going to Boulder, and more people are saying that they're going to miss it. And I have to say, as a first-time festival goer here, I kind of share that bittersweet feeling as well, because this was the accomplishment of a dream that I've had for a very long time, to come to Sundance here in Park City, which is a place that I've been reading about as long as I've been reading about movies, pretty much. But there is a bit of sadness in there with that, because all of the stuff that I learned this year, I showed up here knowing very little. And I've been able to learn so much, and how to get from place to place, and the places I like to eat, and where all the theaters are. And all of that knowledge can't be carried over. Since the 80s and 90s, people that have covered Sundance year after year have been able to bank on that knowledge. And I don't get a chance to do that. If I go to Boulder next year, if I'm able to make that investment again, then it's going to be starting over. But everybody will be starting over next year. But there is that sense here that it is the end of an era. And you're feeling that the last few days, but that hasn't kept people out of the movie lines. This last weekend has actually still been incredibly busy, and I've heard that this year in general has been incredibly busy. So I talked about the award winners for Sundance in my last video. In my first video, I talked about the standout movies from my first few days at the festival. So I want to take this video to talk about some of the standout movies that I've seen, really since I did my last recap video. And let's start with some of the movies that I've really enjoyed, that may have surprised me, and that are some of my favorites of the festival. And we will start with Buddy, which is one that I was really hoping I was going to be able to get into. It is a crazy mind trip of a movie from the creator of Too Many Cooks. So he's already in the Internet Hall of Fame. This movie throws a lot at you. It begins in one format. It changes to a different format. There are some things that were maybe almost a little too extreme for me, but it really got me back by the end. It kind of lost me in the middle, but got me back by the end. This is the kind of movie that I think has to be aimed at a very specialized audience. I haven't seen any information about whether it was acquired or not, but this feels like a Shudder movie or maybe a smaller distribution label, because a general audience that sees this probably is going to turn it off within the first 20 minutes because they're not going to understand what it's going for. If you can get the right people in the door, I could see this movie doing well and maybe even becoming kind of a cult classic. One movie that I saw that I really enjoyed is called The Wait, which again, as of right now, I do not see that it has distribution, although this feels like a movie that Netflix could pick up. It is an indie movie, but it feels like a classic Hollywood movie. It has shades of so many popular movies in the past. It stars Ethan Hawke as a prisoner back in the Depression who is trying to gain his freedom by transporting, along with his other prisoners, these bags full of gold bars through the forest. And so it becomes a thriller. It becomes a survival tale. Russell Crowe has a really good supporting part as the warden of the prison. And it just feels like the kind of movie that would have done really well maybe 20 years ago. It's beautiful cinematography. I hope that it is picked up by somebody that's going to put it in theaters, because I think it deserves to be seen in theaters. But I'd be shocked if this doesn't get acquired eventually. There was a documentary that I saw a few days ago that really blew me away. It was kind of a last-second ad. It's called When a Witness Recants, and it's from documentarian Don Porter. It tells the story of three teenagers in Baltimore in the 1980s who were convicted of a murder that they did not commit. It's about their journey to clear their names and to prove their innocence. But where the movie really has a lot of power is that it follows them after that process, where they confront the people that put them in jail based on eyewitness testimony that wasn't true. And that's where the movie really gets down deep. It gets very raw, very emotional, very honest. And that to me was the strongest part of the movie. It's a very compelling tale, but most of the movies or documentaries about this would have ended it at a certain point. This one goes beyond that point, and I think that's where it really has a lot of power. I think this is one to keep an eye on. Sundance has a very good track record with documentaries when it comes to the Academy Awards, especially in recent years. And I think I said this in my Letterboxd review. If this documentary is not nominated for the Oscar a year from now, then we're in for a very good year of documentaries if there are 5 more movies that could legitimately be in ahead of this one. It's one of my favorite movies of the festival. I've mentioned this one in every single video. It's because this is where the buzz has been, but Josephine, which took home the top prize both from the jury and from the audience here at the Sundance Film Festival in the dramatic category, was also one of my favorite movies of the festival. Again, no word yet on distribution, but it is a powerful film, at times extremely difficult to watch. I'm sure I'm going to go more into it, and I've already gone into it in previous videos, but this one met the hype. There's a documentary called Nuisance Bear, which won the award in the U.S. documentary category, which I thought was a fantastic documentary. It is a nature documentary, and we've seen plenty of those before. It's about polar bears and the fact that as the ice melts, and this takes place up near Canada, they come further south. There's less ice for them to fish on, so they're spending more time around humans. They're called nuisance bears because they are becoming a nuisance to humans. And there isn't really a whole lot of talking heads. There's not a whole lot of narration. It just follows these bears as humans try to chase them away, as they try to find a place where they can live peacefully. And it also has a lot from the perspective of the Inuit people and their experience with the bears and their experience with modernization and the way that the world has kind of pushed their way of life out. I thought that it was a really, really good documentary. At times it's shot almost like an action film. There are some comedic beats. I liked this movie a lot, and I'm glad that I had a chance to see it here at the festival. There was another documentary that I really enjoyed called American Doctor. It's about 3 doctors in the United States who go to Gaza or attempt to go to Gaza to render medical aid to many people, especially children who were hurt in the attacks following Israel's military actions in Gaza and in the West Bank. If you want to talk about difficult to watch, this one is at times almost impossible to watch, impossibly painful to watch. The very first scene of the documentary contains a haunting graphic image from one of these hospitals, but the doctor says to the documentarian who says, well, you know what, I don't know if I'm going to use this image, or I don't know, or I think that I might blur it. He says, no, you have to show this, because if you don't, it's journalistic malpractice. And that's kind of the mentality that this documentary takes. I understand that anything having to do with Israel and Palestine is going to be a controversial issue, but that's what this movie wants. It wants to stimulate discussion. It wants to bring attention to what these doctors are seeing on the ground, and it wants to get people talking about it and cutting through what we see on the news or what we might see on social media, but to the realities of the situation on the ground there. A very powerful documentary, and like I said, difficult to watch, but I think necessary at this moment in time. One movie that I think could have easily won the Grand Jury Prize in a year where Josephine didn't dominate was Ha-Chan Shake Your Booty, starring Rinko Kikuchi in a really, really strong lead performance. This one has already been sold to Sony Pictures. It's about a widow in Japan who enjoys ballroom dancing. After the death of her husband, she kind of loses her passion for it and her passion for life, but refines that passion. It's reignited when a new dance instructor comes to town. And what I liked about this is that it is a really interesting blend of a lot of different things: comedy, drama, magical realism. There's some anime that's even thrown in there, some references to movies. It really is a mashup of all these different ways to tell a story, to shoot a movie. There are fantasy sequences in there, dance sequences in there. I really, really enjoyed this movie, and I think that if it were a different year, as I said, where Josephine wasn't here, this is the kind of movie that you often see winning the top prizes at Sundance. I'm glad that it got distribution. I think that it's going to be able to find an audience, maybe not a huge audience, not the broadest audience, especially because it does take some kind of flights of fancy that not everybody's going to go along with. But this is the kind of movie that Sundance exists for. It's for people to see this kind of thing and bring it to a wider audience. And this is one that I think audiences that do decide to embrace the film are going to enjoy. There was also another film in the U.S. dramatic competition that not a whole lot of people were enthusiastic about, but that I really liked, called Carousel, which stars Chris Pine and Jenny Slate. Chris Pine is a small town doctor. Jenny Slate is a love from his past who returns home to help sell her parents' house. And this, to me, is a great example of a movie finding you where you are in a particular time and in a particular place. Because I don't know if I'd seen this movie, let's say 5 years ago, if it would have had the same impact on me that it did. But because of where I am and because of what's happened in my life over the last 2 or 3 years, this was a very profoundly impactful movie to me for many reasons. And that's why I say that movies are subjective, because they are very personal to who you are and what your life experiences are. And I took a lot out of this movie. I felt seen in many ways by this movie. I can see the people that said that they thought it was a bit lightweight or a cliche. I can see where they're coming from when they say that. But this movie really hit me in a very personal spot. And so it is one of the standouts from this festival. And finally, for talking about standouts, there was another documentary called One in a Million, which won a couple of jury prizes, I believe including the audience prize in the World Cinema Documentary category. It follows a refugee family from Syria, and in particular, one little girl. We see her grow up from around 12 or 13 to her early 20s. And I thought that this was a very interesting concept for a documentary. Usually you might see one that just follows the family as they make this journey. And it's a perilous journey, out of Syria into Europe to find a country that will take them in. That could be a whole movie by itself, but it focuses on this one particular girl as she grows, as she tries to assimilate into the culture, as she embraces or rejects or re-embraces parts of her own past, as she learns about her family, people in her family that she loves who maybe show her different sides as she gets older. And it becomes less a story about refugees generally and more about this specific refugee family. And I thought that it was very, very well done. One of the highlights of the festival. There are also some movies that were kind of high profile that I saw that maybe weren't among my favorites in this festival. I did get a chance to see the Charlie XCX mockumentary The Moment earlier today, which is hitting theaters nationwide, I believe, next weekend. And, I guess I understand why it was such a hot ticket here at Sundance, because she's a very popular artist. But I am, as I like to say, an old. I am not the target market for this documentary, and a lot of it is kind of predicated on the fact that you already love Charlie XCX and you're already familiar with everything that she's done. I know a few of her songs. I saw her on SNL. I thought that she was pretty good. That's about it. I get it. There are going to be people that are way more passionate about this film than I am, but even given that, a lot of it just didn't quite ring true for me. I like the intention of the movie, which is very much about kind of rejecting the over-commercialization of yourself and exploring that pressure to just do more of the same. But I saw it in the context of Sundance, where, tickets to the premiere last weekend were going for 10, 15 times their face value. One of the big hot pieces of merch that I saw so many people wearing was a beanie that was branded with The Moment. And that does, to me, conflict a little bit with some of the messages of the movie. But it's obviously a very personal film for Charlie XCX. I thought that she was good in it. There are other actors like Alexander Skarsgård that I thought were very good in it as well. But it wasn't necessarily one that was a standout to me. And on the same lines, or along the same lines, there was also another A24 film called Undertone, which is getting a release later this year. I'd heard some good things about it, which is why I went to the press screening for it. It is about a podcast host who's in a house with her mother. Her mother is upstairs dying slowly of natural causes. She's hosting this latest episode, and it's about these recordings that she and her co-host got sent, these audio recordings that are super creepy, and they're listening to them in real time. The sound design I thought was very good in this movie. It has some creepy moments, but I didn't think the script was that great. It is a very typical A24 horror movie in that it is very slow, and then how much you like it is going to depend on the direction it takes at the end, which is a very A24 ending. So I think that it fits into that A24 horror movie template, but it didn't really do a whole lot for me, as a lot of A24 horror movies haven't done. But if you like A24 horror, if you like a lot of the movies they've done in the past, then I think that you will probably like this one just a little bit more than me. There are some movies that were hot tickets this weekend that I don't believe I'll get a chance to see. I Want Your Sex has been a hot ticket from day one. run. I've been trying to get into one of the screenings. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. History of Concrete was a really buzzy documentary that I've tried to get on the wait list for a couple times. That hasn't happened. I can still try, I think, one more time. And then The Only Living Pickpocket in New York. This one debuted late in the festival and has become kind of the buzziest film of the second half. John Turturro's performance in this movie particularly has really been praised by a lot of people that I've heard. I tried to get into this one that just didn't happen. So this could be a movie that you see later on this year, maybe a push for John Turturro at the Academy Awards. Just not enough screenings, and my schedule just didn't sync up for me to be able to see that. And then actually, now that I'm thinking about it, there was one movie that I did not mention in my last video that I saw some people ask about that was also one that picked up buzz as the festival went along, and that was Wicker, which stars Olivia Colman and Alexander Skarsgård. Olivia Colman is this fishwife in Old England. She walks around selling fish, and she asks Peter Dinklage, not the actual person, it's a character he's playing, to make a husband for her out of wicker, and that husband is played by Alexander Skarsgård. I thought it was a really sweet romance. The script meanders a little bit, and so I think it robs the story of some of its impact, but the core of the movie is very sweet, and it also features some outstanding makeup work for the wicker husband. I'm sure it was probably augmented by some sort of visual effects, but I was glad that I saw it because it does have a lot of good laughs. It's a really sweet core at the center of the story. I just wish that more around it was a little bit stronger. But Wicker and The Only Living Pickpocket in New York are great examples of movies that didn't really come into the festival with a whole lot of buzz or a whole lot of chatter, but as people saw them, they started getting talked about and they became the hot tickets. And that's something that I've been really excited to see happen in real time while I've been here. And as I said, it is sad for me to be wrapping up this almost 2 weeks here in Park City because I've been wanting to do this for so long and it is finally coming to an end. But I plan to make the most out of my time here. As I said, I've got 3 or 4 at least in-person screenings left in the next evening, plus tomorrow, Sunday, which is the day that you're watching this video. And every minute in between, I'm going to be trying to fit in online viewings of movies to watch as many as I possibly can, which will still only be about half of the movies that were allowed to be in the festival that were accepted into Sundance this year. But that's just how it goes. You see as many as you can, but you can never see everything. So stay tuned right here on the channel. I will be traveling back home on Monday. Charts with Dan will be out as usual on Tuesday, and then I will have my video recapping everything that I saw here at Sundance and probably ranking it or at least putting it into groups on Wednesday when I get back in studio. So thank you very much for watching this video and for watching all of my updates from Sundance. They haven't been my most viewed videos, but it does seem like a lot of people are enjoying what they see out of them. And really, this was not a trip for me to get a whole bunch of new followers or to make a whole bunch of money, actually quite the opposite, or to, gain clout. This really was the achievement of a lifelong dream for me, to be in a place that is just devoted to indie cinema. And I have been absolutely in my element and having the time of my life. So thank you everybody for listening to this update from the Sundance Film Festival. I will see you back in the studio for business as usual, plus a recap of what I saw here in Park City. Until then, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.